Hi there. Thanks for joining us for today's Facebook Live. This is a really exciting day in Washington, D.C. for anyone following cannabis policy reform. We had a landmark bill introduced in the Senate, and there's a lot more going on. Just to recap, I'm Aaron Smith, Executive Director of the National Cannabis Industry Association. For 12 years, we have been proudly representing Main Street cannabis businesses in Washington, D.C. We've been moving the dial slowly but surely, and soon enough, we're going to get to the place where cannabis is descheduled from Federal Controlled Substances Act and regulated similarly to alcohol. And a bill was introduced today in the Senate that would actually do just that. And I'm really pleased to have my colleague, Michelle Freeberg, here, to our Deputy Director of Government Relations, to kind of unpack that and tell us what's in the bill. So Michelle, let us know.
Thanks, Aaron, and hello, everybody from hot and steamy Washington, D.C. Like you said, there has been no shortage of news about cannabis policy reform today at all. Excited to talk to you all about the latest Senate bill, but also about some other policy things that are coming down the pipeline for next week. So like you said, been real busy. But you guys, I'm sure that a lot of you saw today, big news, the long-awaited Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. You'll hear me call it CAOA since that's sort of long. But that bill was introduced finally today. That was dropped by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senate Finance Committee Chairman Ron Wyden, and Senator Cory Booker. And, they have been working on this bill for at least 18 months. Going back to February of 2021, we were actually a part of a stakeholder discussion group where they first unveiled that this was a bill that they were going to begin working on. And we've been really excited to follow it throughout the process, even though I think it's probably a little bit longer than we thought it was going to be. And I think certainly a little bit longer than I think the Senate offices bargained for too. But, you might remember last summer, almost about a year ago to the day, the sponsoring offices, those 3 Senate offices, unveiled a discussion draft. And so that's not formally introduced legislation. A discussion draft is exactly what it sounds like, essentially, a rough draft of what they were thinking. And they opened that up to the public, not just groups like NCIA, but they opened that discussion draft up to the public and said, we would love to hear your comments about what's good in this and what's bad in this, what's missing, etc. And so we ended up submitting over 40 pages of comments to that discussion draft at the end of last summer. Our comments were part of, I think they received tens of thousands of pages of comments. So you can imagine that's why it's definitely taken almost a year for them to work through all of that. And I know those offices have also been working with no less than 10 Senate committees as they go through that to try to craft a better bill. So there's some of the backstory. Like I mentioned, those comments were due almost a year ago now. And ever since then, advocates have been waiting with bated breath, especially us, to see what comes out of that as we continue to work with those offices to try to craft ideal legislation. So like we mentioned, that brings us up to today when the long-awaited CAOA has been introduced. There was about 100 something more pages in this introduced version than there was in the discussion draft. So there was a number of changes, some of them substantive, some of them more just clarifying different things and expanding upon definitions and stuff like that. So a good chunk of stuff to go through. And disclaimer, because this bill did just drop I think something like less than 8 hours ago, we're certainly still going through it all and analyzing it, and look forward to taking that deep dive and telling everybody and all of our members what's in there. But there's definitely a couple top line things that we're excited to talk about today. So I don't know if you want to comment on that any, Aaron, or I can just go into talking about the bill a little.
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing that's exciting, we have legislation around cannabis reform is dropping every other week, it seems, these days. But one thing that's really remarkable about this is that it's not only a very comprehensive bill that not just legalizes cannabis, but creates a regulatory framework, but it also has the backing of the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Michelle, I mean, maybe to let us know, about the regulatory framework and the tax structure. Let us know a little bit more about that.
Sure, happy to go through a couple, like I said, of high level points. Again, the biggest thing, or I shouldn't say the biggest thing, but one of the biggest things this bill does is end federal prohibition. And it does that by removing cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act. Now, that is important to remember, though, that states can then decide to maintain prohibition in their states if they decide to. So, if somewhere like Idaho is really against this and hates it, they can go into their state constitution or legislature or whatever, what have you, continue and maintain prohibition, but it's important that this is the end of federal prohibition. So that's a huge one. And another big point with that is that it's going to transfer the authority from the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, over to both the FDA and the TTB, which is the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, as well as the Treasury Department. But, we all are aware that cannabis regulation is going to touch every single agency in DC, not just those three, but those are the three primary ones. So beyond removing cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act, the bill does establish a tax structure. And to be honest, Aaron, I know that was a big thing that we were concerned about when we submitted our comments. I think it's something that we're still concerned about and are going to have to dive in because, like Aaron mentioned at the top of this, we really want to make sure that any bill that moves forward is keeping small businesses, equity businesses, women-owned businesses front of mind. And so when we're thinking about that, the tax structure here has a couple of different issues, right? So we could all debate about the rates, which we will be talking about. There is a graduated tax rate that goes up from 5% and actually increases up to 25%, which on top of local, state, municipal taxes could be absolutely crippling, especially to small businesses, primarily to small businesses, and encourage more consolidation, which is something I think we can all agree we're seeing too much of right now, and it's incredibly worrisome. But the other thing beyond that tax rate that I think has me at least pausing for some concern is also about how often businesses would be required to pay those taxes. So in the discussion draft, they actually wanted those taxes to be paid every 2 weeks, which is something that no other industry is forced to do. I believe that the infrastructure in terms of the financial system and our tax agencies were not even prepared to do. So we pushed back against that hard. That did change in the introduced version, They edited that so that it's actually due quarterly. But again, another big problem with this is that although there is a lower tax rate for small and mid-sized cannabis businesses, that money is still due up front. So you're essentially getting a tax rebate after you've already paid that extra money. So again, really, really troublesome, I think, when we think about smaller operators essentially being asked to front that tax money to the federal government, who then get it back. But you can understand how that would be an incredibly burdensome provision. Another couple top line items, this does establish a federal age for adult use cannabis purchases. That is 21. So we had advocated to leave that to the states. Most states have made that 21. But again, it's important to note that is adult use. So we're not talking about medical cannabis there, but I found that interesting. And another thing I really liked, though, is that there was a number of small business administration provisions outlined in both the discussion draft that have been expanded upon in this new introduced version. But something I was really, really happy to see was that the sponsoring offices certainly took a look at our recommendations that we had put forth last year, because I noticed a lot of similarities in some of the things that we suggested that ended up making it into the bill. And knowing that that was in the small business section as well as others was really, really gratifying to read.
Yeah, and it's important to remember, right, this is the beginning of a conversation, and that the bill is not ideal. No piece of legislation is ideal, but it's a huge step forward, just that it's now pending in the Senate. And of course, you and Michael and Madeline will be working the halls of Congress for many months to try to work to improve this bill and ultimately pass it into law, or some version of it. But I also want to mention that our members, who of course make that work possible, also have an opportunity to come to Washington, D.C. September 13th and 14th for lobby days. Finally, NCIA is coming back for in-person lobby days, where our members are able to connect with legislators, with members of Congress, their staffs, tell their personal stories. And this is going to be, I would imagine, a big part of what they're going to be talking about. Do you want to expand a little bit upon lobby days, what that means, Michelle, and what else we're going to talk about out there at lobby days?
Yeah, absolutely. No, Aaron, I'm so glad you brought that up. It is super exciting to know that we're going to have our members back here in the nation's capital, like you said, September 13th and 14th. And, lobbying is enshrined in your First Amendment rights, and it is your right to petition the government. And so that's exactly what lobby days gives you an opportunity to do. All you have to do is go to our website and sign up. This is a members only event. So if your membership isn't up to date, you might want to get on that. But we really couldn't make it any easier for you. Mike, Maddie, and I schedule all of your meetings, put you on a team, provide you with training, and let you loose on the hill with, like I said, meetings that we've already scheduled. So it's pretty much a piece of cake. You just got to get out to Washington and we'll take care of the rest. But again, this is an incredible opportunity to talk to congressional offices about your business, what you're experiencing, and talking about what you're seeing on the ground, because it's one thing for me to communicate that from our members, but there really is nothing like telling your story firsthand to an office. And you'd be shocked at the way we actually really see that manifest itself after lobby days. We've seen upticks in co-sponsorships and hearings and all different things. So this is going to be a little bit different. The Capitol is still technically closed to the public, so there's going to be some differences and little logistic tweaks that we're going to have to make as we look forward to that. But we hope that we'll see you here in Washington. Again, you can visit our website, thecannabisindustry.org, to see all about that.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, I just want to touch on another issue that I think is near and dear to everyone's heart, and that is banking. While the CAOA Act, it's a great step forward. It's a great, it's a vehicle to have the conversation about what comprehensive reform will look like. The reality is, I don't think anybody thinks it actually has the 60 votes needed to pass the Senate. I'm excited because I think Safe Banking Act does have the votes to pass the Senate, and it's passed the House, seven times?
7 times now.
So what's next for safe banking in the Senate, and what can our members do to make that a reality?
Yeah, well, I mean, no matter what we're talking about, whether it's CAOA, safe banking, the rule of thumb that I'll always tell our members is to remain politically engaged. Don't give up hope. I know, especially right now, trust me, I work in politics. It can be incredibly disheartening sometimes, but it's always important to stay engaged, whether that's at your state or local level even, but definitely federally as well. So never stop getting in touch with your representatives, your senators. But like you said, Aaron, safe banking has passed the House 7 times now, most recently attached as an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, which actually just passed the House, I think last week. My sense of time is a little messed up. It's been a busy day, but that passed out of the House last week. But again, the bill has been stuck in the Senate for a couple of years now. And so it enjoys 9 Republican sponsors on the Senate side. I think it has around, my memory serves me right, 40 co-sponsors in the Senate. And like you mentioned, that's really, really close to the 60 votes required in order to get around the Senate filibuster, especially knowing that there's already 9 Republicans signed on. So it's important to remain engaged. I know that banking is an issue that affects so many in our industry. And, we really see banking as an issue that, again, primarily affects small and equity businesses that cannot have the same access to capital as their larger counterparts. And so, again, that's not to say that certain improvements couldn't be made to SAFE. We're definitely trying to work with offices to do that. But again, have to work within the confines of what Congress is willing to do. So the interplay between CAOA and SAFE, though, is one that is certainly tied together. Leader Schumer, along with specifically Senator Booker, have taken sort of a hardline stance on moving safe banking before comprehensive reform, i.e. CAOA. And now that this bill has been introduced and that conversation has formally begun, I'm hopeful that maybe we can find some ways to move forward on SAFE. There's even been proposals out there about combining SAFE for some sort of SAFE Plus package with expungement provisions or research or veterans items. And so I don't have any updates on that yet. That's still a little nascent. We're still focused on CAOA right now, but the fight for banking continues. And the good news is that we can all walk and chew gum at the same time. And so, excited that in every meeting we talk about banking, we talk about the tax issue of 280E, and we certainly talk about creating an equitable and diverse industry. And I think that CAOA is a great first step at doing that.
Right on. Well, thank you, Michelle. And I just wanted to just say thank you and your team in DC for having worked on this issue for so many years. And there's really nobody else who has been beating the drum for cannabis policy reform as long as NCIA. I think, Michelle, you've been here for over 8 years. It's hard to believe.
Almost, yeah.
And it's really a testament to your work that others have entered the space. We now have who knows how many cannabis lobbyists on the Hill, but thanks to our members, NCIA is making sure that Main Street cannabis has a voice and a seat at the table in DC, not just Wall Street cannabis, not just those that are well-heeled enough to hire their own lobbyists. So big thank you goes out to our members for making this advocacy possible, and look out for more information, more detailed analysis of CAOA and more in the coming days. And again, please join us in Washington, D.C. for our 10th annual Cannabis Industry Lobby Day, September 13th and 14th.
It was great to talk with you, Aaron. Thank you so much. People can find me at Twitter at Michelle Rutter. If they want to ask me any questions about CAOA, I'm happy to answer. And thank you guys again. Exciting day.
Thanks, everyone.